povlačim sa tonom i zvukom, svi možete pisati u chat boxu, bit će ovde sa vama sve vrijeme ako imate neka dodatna pitanja. Kada krene, znači sada nam je samo Daniela prva u zvaničnom obraćanju, Vukan iz tehnike će nam reći da li želi da uključimo, da i svi isključimo kamere, a samo Daniela da ostavi uključenu.
Molim moderatore da nešto kažu.
Evo nas, tu smo, prisutni, hello to everyone.
Ok, sad ću ja da vam kažem kada da krenete. Stream je počeo. Za 5 sekundi. Može.
Ok. Dobar dan svima. Pozdravljamo vas iz Ministarstva kulture, ali ne iz kancelariju koje sedi naša pomoćnica ministra Daniela.
Good day, everyone. Greetings from the office of the ministry. We would like to greet all of the guests who are participating now, and those who are going to join a bit later. The entire material will be available on YouTube. It is our great honor and pleasure for Dr. Ivana and me, Nikola, to be moderators today. This is a conference, but we avoid to call it a conference. This is a discussion, first of all, about how to conceive and how to redefine something that already exists in our heads, in our consciousness, but also in our institutions. And this is the Museum of Nikola Tesla, and how to present this piece of heritage of the world and Serbia, how to adjust it to the modern times. As moderators today, we would like to give work to Ms. Vanušić the words so she can open the conference and so we can start our work today. Daniela, you have the word. Thank you, Ivana and Nikola. Esteemed colleagues, I would like to greet all of the participants who are with us today, all of those who are listening to us live, and also those who are going to view the conference later on. Today we have a complex topic, a relocation of the Museum of Nikola Tesla. We have several discussions to lead, discuss the location, discuss the content, and discuss the way the museum is going to be connected to Nikola Tesla, the international scientist of Serbian origin, who basically invented the world today. The museum so far is located in Belgrade, in Krunska, and it's original in the world. It has a lot of personal objects. It has I can't really follow this. In the past years, there were more initiatives to relocate the museum in a new area, which would be adequate for the needs of a modern museum for Nikola Tesla. In December 2020, the government of Republic of Serbia reached a decision to locate the museum in the power plant Nikola Tesla, and several aspects of cultural heritage will be protected in this way.
Industrijskih vrednosti objekata, kreiranju savremene
creating a contemporary museum setting and their symbolic correlation with this great figure of history. The thermoelectric plant was built in the period from 1930 to 1932, according to the Swiss Association from Basel, and it is the witness to cultural diversity of our society and its pace with the world. The beginnings of modernization and the entry into the industrial era, and that building of this plant marked this step. and it can be imagined by Tesla's inventions. And this electric plant supplied electric energy to the entire Belgrade, and it will be revitalized as a new museum of Nikola Tesla. The magical electrical energy is something that inspires awe in the world still today. Transformation of the thermoelectric plant and opening of the genuine Museum of the Genius is aimed at this conference is aimed at inspiring lively discussion and to see whether how to revisit and rethink this museum. The ministry is following this process very actively and participating in all the activities through the BRD. We have secured funds for producing the technical documentation and further funds for architectural and construction solution will be provided for through the work museum. Best idea for solution for the Museum of Nikola Tesla will be contributed by discussions today, and all of it will contribute to having a genuine museum of genius in Belgrade very soon.
Thank you, Daniela. Can we give the word to our first speaker today, Mr. Renovic? That would mean that we have to start a bit early so we can have more time for our first session today. If there are more questions, I hope that everybody agrees. Greetings to you all. It is my great pleasure to take part in this session as a representative of an older generation. This is partly new for me. I hope that I will manage. I have my colleague, my younger colleague next to me, who will help me if there's anything to do concerning the icons and the menus. Instead of me, you will see a set of photos, and I will provide some comments for those photos. As Daniela just said, she gave us an intro about the problem that we're discussing today. I will try only from one side to present the power plant, power and light in Belgrade, but also we will show, this is an example of how it was photographed from the air. These are several segments of the power plant, so the production part, the mobile crane, which slides and moves in the tracks. As you can see, it's used for transfer of coal. This is a production pump for creation of required water for the power plant functioning. In the beginning, I would like to point out that the power plant is located on two plots, which could cause certain problems, but we will discuss it a bit later. These are photos of today's situation of the power plant. This is the technical drawing and schematics of the power plant. This is the condition of the power plant for the past 15 years. So the condition is not the best. The power plant is in pretty bad shape. It should be explored in detail. This is the inside of the power plant. I want to share some experiences concerning the industrial and other museums in the past 50 years. The oldest museum is the Museum of the Post Office, all from 1923, almost 100 years old, is located in the building of the ministry, and as such, it has a rich collection, and it does not have any problems concerning its future. The next museum that we also we also opened by the state is the Aviation Museum in Belgrade, and the building was constructed exclusively for the needs of the museum. The armed forces of Serbia are taking care of the museum. However, now there are certain technical problems with many problems that they have. I don't want to go into the details. The next museum that I want to talk about is the Industrial Museum of the Coal Mine in Senje. It's specific because for the past 20 years we are part of the initiative to revitalize this building, to undertake actions to preserve the museum. It was conceived as a museum, a sustainable ecological museum. When this initiative started developing, we had an example of Belgrade Museum in Sweden. The museum was revitalized with the help of the UN funds. Today it is a live museum. However, the idea of sustainability did not actually happen because the public company for industrial exploitation of coal did not make it to these days, and so also the museum did not achieve full sustainability. I'm not really sure if this idea of sustainability is viable at this point. The next museum that I want to talk about, which will be active in the several next years, the Museum of Arms in Krakowicz. It was made in the middle of last century. It's the birthplace of our industry. The museum itself was created in an old building from 1880s. It was not changed significantly. The building itself is not in the best condition. However, what could be a danger for the museum is the instability of the company within which the museum operates. This is the first building of the arms factory or arsenal, and the vicinity of the factory. I'm mentioning the Krakowicz Museum because of the Gosha Museum in Jasenica. This is also a company museum, a company that is not active today. It's under bankruptcy. The future is also discussable. The next example is the city power plant. This is the condition from 15 years ago, and now after renovations, the space used for the exhibition then and now. And so why I wanted to show these museums in the first place and the problems that concern them, or these are company or industrial museums concerning science and technology, and museums who exhibit applied sciences. What I believe is good about this initiative is concerning the Museum of Nikola Tesla is that the state has supported the entire project. And what happened in the end of last century, and especially in the past 15 years with the degradation of industry, I just want to say that this initiative is supposed to be long-term, so that the museum can survive the times that are coming. The Museum of Nikola Tesla has a lot of visitors and there's a lot of interest for it. So there is some certain sustainability which could be achieved from that aspect. Thank you very much.
Nismo mogli da zamislimo.
We couldn't have imagined a better introduction to what industrial heritage is and what its purpose is because it is quite sure that Nikola Tesla's heritage, as well as his persona, is definitely part of industrial heritage and technology and innovation and everything that leads us into the 21st century. I have to be a little bit personal. I was born in Titoujice, and the second electric plant in the world was actually created after the designs of Nikola Tesla. We always thought of it as view to the future, even though it was positioned in nature and it was on the fringes of the city. I'm glad to hear that Rifat initiated some issues, which are raised some issues very important. How we think about museums and how do we think about heritage that's not classical cultural art heritage that museums usually deal with, or the natural museums, but the heritage that's basically, and I should say very directly, speak of us and lives with us still. It is not in the past. Industry is still with us and its results, but we're very aware that we are entering into an age of services, and the classical industries are still necessary for us. I want to emphasize something else. That's to emphasize that we also have a tradition of the transfer. This is the 50th anniversary of establishing the first ecological museum, and I'm following up on the same museum which was established in 1970. As of the first museum was opened in France, which actually marked the transition from the transition from in the industry to ecology. It also marked a shift of the awareness of how we think about museums, from classical hierarchical museums with managers, steering boards, boards of directors, very specialized experts. We got something that we have today, democratic institutions, heritage that is problematic and but relevant, and so we said that industrial heritage is one of these issues. So once again, I want to thank Rifat. We wanted to announce the first session. Rifat gave us a fantastic intro. We will have 2 more guests in the first session. It will be our pleasure to discuss with them historical, industrial history, heritage, the concepts of heritage, and the issue of who and how Nikola Tesla made us owe him a lot globally. Excuse me, I can't hear. The Museum of Science and Technology, director of the Museum of Science and Technology, Sonia Isco from the Faculty of Architecture in Ljubljana, and Vladimir Pereich, who has until recently been director of the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. So these are the speakers in the first session. I'd like to add that it is important to pay attention to something else in regard to industrial heritage. We have to bear in mind that the revitalization of, so in this case, the thermoelectric plant must include different experts and cooperation of various from various fields. Our experience here says that it's quite hard to achieve, and it's a long-term process that must delegate, that must be delegated by some higher body. It could be the Ministry of Culture in this case, bearing in mind that they're responsible for revitalization of this thermoelectric plant. Revitalization also doesn't mean only to revitalize the space. We want to bear in mind what we want to achieve with this revitalization. In this case, we want to make a new Nikola Tesla museum, perhaps the biggest so far. We want to present appropriately not only Tesla's heritage and legacy, but his thoughts, his methodology, his lifestyle. And for those who don't know, I work in the Museum of Nikola Tesla, thanks to Mr. Jovanovic, who invited me to cooperate years back. And I love this museum and this topic, and I am looking forward to start talking about Tesla as a scientist and genius, and to see how we can show, display this genius. How can we present a genius if we are not geniuses ourselves? This is something that we also need to bear in mind and try to go a step further from what's obvious in regards to contemporary technologies. Perhaps the first thing that we need to start from is the architecture of the edifice itself. That must be modified, adjusted, dedicate for something else different than it was. It's a hard thing to do, but people who are in architecture have already been in these situations, and I'm sure they know how to do it. Now I will introduce our next speaker, Ms. Sonia Isco. I don't know if she is with us. Yes, she's here.
Good day, Sonia. Sonia comes from Ljubljana. She works in the Faculty of Architecture, and Ms. Ivko has spent most of her life, as far as I managed to find, she dedicated it to industrial heritage, its preservation, revitalization, and attempts to create certain utopias in environments where it was initially difficult to do that. I give you word and we await for your presentation. Thank you, Ivana. Now I will share my screen. Do you see it? Yes, we see it.
I will switch to English as I'm not so comfortable in Serbian, but neither my English is perfect, but I hope we will discuss it later, the stories I wanted to present. As I said, dear colleagues, dear participants, dear organizers, many thanks for the invitation, and it is really my pleasure to contribute to this discussion about the transformation and relocation of the Nikola Tesla Museum. After some introductory thoughts, which I will relate to the role of the heritage of the industrialization in contemporaneity, this is important for me. I will concentrate on two case studies from Slovenia, that I hope will be interesting and somehow useful for your upcoming project. Talking about the heritage of industrialization, it is important to understand and consider all, or better said, the most possible dimensions it has brought to us. It has not only changed the production processes, but it fundamentally transformed our environment and people's lives. Its impact has been so widespread that it has affected and continues to affect, this is important, the very stability of the planet, ecosystem, and climate. Industrialization is a key driver of climate changes, And unfortunately, we have not yet developed any effective tools to combat this process, as the recent Glasgow summit showed. These are topics which are important, especially when we are focusing on a new project. I would say that we're here talking about the comfortable heritage aspects, and in my opinion, we as the heritage experts have to include these issues also in our projects. We have to promote the importance of the environmental aspects for the future sustainable life. As I see also, your project is a great opportunity to somehow involve these issues and build on them. It is fact that industrialization involves a complex mix of consequences, and that they are certainly resulted in significant advances in human development. This is no doubt. These are important issues. They helped us very much as the civilization. And I think that still active, as well as abandoned industrial sites, mines, factory complexes, infrastructure systems, represent a vital source of information, and they are starting points for steering new development. This is important because they based on experience of the past, but also they have based also to the new knowledge. They are essential parts of our identities, and as such they are places of new inspirations, and they are more and more included in reuse processes, where through adaptation are becoming the processes of new innovations. I am showing here some examples which are, of course, the best world examples from rural region in Germany, but already Rifat showed us several really promising examples how in Serbia you're dealing with industrial heritage. Also in Slovenia, we are trying to be as much as possible connected with this kind of development, and are developing some projects. Here are pictures of few of them, but through this slide, I would like to emphasize the importance of people. Industrial heritage is important because it is the place of work and innovation, and it brings together different identities of the wide range of people, from scientists to the production workers. They have all contributed, and we can say that heritage, industrial heritage, is important to that, for them. Those who are working or who were working since recently in those buildings, in those structures, and also those who worked there in past times. And this is confirmed by many local initiatives that had developed in post-industrial areas. And they are promoters of cultural inventions, of science inventions either, and they're becoming new places of tourist development and also new industries. So I think people, the visitors or general publics, they have to be somehow in the focus of our presentations and our projects. Anyway, as FAR Convention said, we are actually preserving heritage for the people. Heritage belongs to the people. This is something we have to emphasize. Recently, we developed several interesting projects in Slovenia. Idrija is now for 10 years almost listed as the World Heritage Site, together with Almadin. We very effectively renewed the zinc and lead mine in Mežica in Koroška region. There are several attempts of new creative industries which are placed in former industrial sites. But in my opinion, there are still so many opportunities. would have to go for them. Anyway, we are talking today about the contribution of very special person. We are talking, I will try to talk in general about the inventors, scientists who have been prolific contributors to all these industrial positive changes that happened in different fields and in very various ways. Their stories are all inspiring and encouraging, and as such, they are very important to people, to general public. They are sources for us as heritage professionals to communicate and to present their stories, yeah, in a way that they will contribute to the common good. This is something I think we have to have in our minds. Yeah, the current pandemic situation is showing us how important it is to communicate science. I think that we as a society, not just Slovenians or Serbians, but in general, we didn't do enough to do that. We can see these consequences today. Yeah. So I would like to discuss in detail 2 examples from Slovenia. Both I hope will be interesting for you because they are presenting the work and the life of the scientists in their own way and place it somehow in broader context of the history of the science, but also to the contemporary situation. The first project is on the slide. It is the Cultural Center of European Space Technologies, built in Vitanje in 2013. It was very ambitious project, but it is combination which present on one side the legacy of the, I think not so well known scientist Hermann Potocznik Nordunk. He was actually the first space architect, we could say it from the today's position. But this project is also interesting because it connects the contemporary idea of Slovenian artists. Artists who had a vision on the basis of Nordunk's idea of the space technologies to develop or to widen the research of the space. We are using space until recently, we were using the space just for military surveillance and for the communication, but they proposed to use the space also for an art. So this small group, they were founders of the project called XEUT. I will talk a little bit later about them. But first, who is Hermann Potocznik Nordunk? He was born in 1892 in Pula, where his father was a physician, military physician. Also, his mother was Slovenian, and they moved to Slovenia after sudden death of his father. So they lived in Maribor for several years as a family. Hermann Potocznik went to study to Vienna, where he was educated as an expert in bridges and rail constructions. Later, he got tuberculosis on the front of the First World War, and but anyway, he managed to graduate from the College of Technology in Vienna too. His most important and only published work is this book here, where he used the pen name. He somehow hoped that he will got better position in the German-speaking area, so he used the name Nordunk, no Ordunk, no order actually, yeah, what is typical for the space. There is no up and down, yeah, and so on. So he discussed here the problem of the space flight, yeah, and the subtitle is the rocket motor. Rocket engine, sorry. Why is he important? Because this book is still considered as one of the fundamental works of the first generation of the flight pioneers. It directly influenced the work of the second generation of the space pioneers and helped establish a new science, astronautics. Yeah, his most valuable contribution was the design of the space station named Inhabitable Will, which is regarded as the first comprehensive example of architecture of space. That's why we are talking about of him as the architect of the space. There is evidence that Werner von Braun and other key personalities within the new NASA space program studied his book and other also unpublished texts. His work was also inspiration for the very well-known novel by Arthur Clarke and, of course, the legendary movie from 1968 of Stanley Kubrick. Somehow he's based also in this wider pop culture. So, who were the promoters of the idea or ideas of the Nordunk? It is the group, but the most important, the protagonist is Dragan Živadinov, the artist, the theater director who was fascinated by Nordunk. And we are saying that he is also the person who helped art in Slovenia to enter the space. Since 1980s, he studied intensively the movement in the weightless space and therefore, of course, acting in the space. He organized, I would say, lifelong project, theater project with his wife, Dunja Zupancic, also on the picture, which is named Nordunk. And of course, it is about Cosmo kinetic theater, how to prepare the art performances in weightless space. In 1998, he even became a candidate cosmonaut. And together with his team, he wanted somehow to find a place in Slovenia to celebrate Potocznik and to promote his idea, but also the idea of the group about the culturalization of the space. So somehow he connected the heritage and the new artistic idea, which I think is also very important. He was the first who came with this idea in the world. With the support of the Ministry of Culture and of course with the very big support of the local authorities from Vitanje. Why Vitanje? I have almost forgotten to tell. Yeah, this is the or this is not birthplace, but this is it is the birthplace of their grandparents. But this is the place where the family of his mother originated. It could be built also in Pula or in Maribor, Dragan Živadinov said, but of course he found a really big support. First they prepared like a memorial room, this black one I showed you a few slides before, and he got the support from the Ministry of Culture. As I said, they got the funds, and really artists concentrated on program. They cooperated with scientists, with cosmonauts from Russia and from astronauts from America, and they engaged four Slovenian young officers to prepare the project for the museum. And here is the building. The Xeud was open, as I said, in 2013. The whole building is, of course, inspired by the Nordunk's idea of the inhabitable ville. It has ramp all around, and it somehow also not that just present this newness in the very small town in more village, I would say, of Vitanje, but it also is the place for the local community center, for the local library. And on the other hand, the idea was to open widely the story, and that this place would become a research center for the culturalization of the space. Unfortunately, things went wrong later. Maybe I can talk later about that, but now the Nordunk Center still exists, but the most important part about the research and art is not placed here anymore. The second project I would like to present is the recent one. It is the idea of colleagues from Slovenian Technical Museum, which during severe migrant crisis in 2018 started the project Knowledge Without Frontiers. They wanted to show how migrations are important for all of us. Yeah, this was very societal, engaged project, and it was really very well accepted. They presented several Slovenian scientists who went abroad because of the research, because they didn't have good opportunities in own countries, and they showed how they contribute. Even so success project that they were invited to the United States to show the most important ones who were connected with United States, and they're expected to be shown the exhibition also in the building of the United Nations in this next spring. So I think that this exhibition is a really good show that importance of presenting and actually using heritage for the current context is very important, and that heritage can also give us some solutions for the societal changes. And as such, these approaches allow public actually to reflect further, to increase tolerance and cooperation. And I hope that these ideas will be also somehow usable and inspiring for you who are preparing this, I think, very excellent and project which we are all looking for. Thank you very much.
Okay, Sonia, thank you very much. It was very, very inspiring indeed. Obviously, the very important things are finding the humans and persons in the scientists and trying to represent any kind of a connection that ordinary people can connect, not just to that historical person, but also to the humankind as a whole. And as you perfectly pointed out, it's always holistic approach, and it's syncretism of different senses, the music, the theater, the science, because at the end, as you said, knowledge without boundaries is everything, actually. Yeah. So there are no boundaries between arts and sciences, and at the end, it all comes together. So I already got 17 questions for you, but we shall wait after the end of the session. I'm giving the word to Ivana now.
And here, sorry. He has published several dozens of scientific papers, studies. His professional life was completely dedicated to Nikola Tesla as a historical figure, somebody whose whole heart is in this. researching for a number of years. I want to for Mr. Jovanovic to discuss several things in particular, to tell us something more about the awareness of how great Nikola Tesla was, and if it is possible to understand how big he was without detailed insight into his work, and to whether he is recognized enough in Serbia and in the world, and about whether his methods have something to do with his personality, because Mr. Jovanovic researched a lot about his character, mental development, background and education, and developed a completely different view on that. So I'd like him to share some of his insights about Nikola Tesla with us. Please take the stand. Thank you for the introduction. I want to greet all the colleagues who are participating in this conference, and for all of us who have been in the museum or with the museum for years. This is a very special moment. On the one hand, we've all been enjoying the privilege to take part in this story about the museum and the great person. And on the other hand, we've spent years thinking about the lacks, the shortages of the museum, and the possibilities how to address that. So we are now actually in a very concrete situation. The decision has been made about the moving of the museum. The building has been chosen, and great work is ahead of us. And regardless of how much time we have ahead of us, 1 year, 5 or 10, in any case, I believe that time is passing fast, and the tasks ahead of us are great, because it's a great personality that we are discussing. I prepared an overview because I thought that all the participants would find it useful to go through critical, contextual, and conceptual story about the Museum of Nikola Tesla, and that it's good to put this story about the future museum into a timeline. On the other hand, if I have time, I will try to say something more about my research and my personal experiences in regards to things that need to be promoted in regard to the communication between museum and its audiences. Here I'd like to say that next year we'll celebrate the 70th anniversary since the establishment of museum, and it will be 45 years since I first stepped into museum as a curator. And it seems that I've spent all my life there. I've never, I've made some pauses in working for the museum, but I've never made a pause in dealing with Tesla. It was established the museum was established in 1952. And it was a unique technical museum in ex-Yugoslavia. It was a project of culture and science, and on the other hand, it was a political project that was supposed to serve the ideology of coexistence of Yugoslav nations and promotion of brotherhood and unity that were flagship notions at that time. Some of these things were maintained, some things were kept silent about. So the museum was established within a very small circle. Sava Kuzmanovic was one of the initiators, and he's the one who established it in Belgrade. It functioned during Tito's life as a quite closed-off institution that on the one hand had a clear educational mission, School excursions came to visit, and the message of great personality was passed on them. Every 10 years, every year, when the anniversary of Tesla's death conferences were organized. And this is something we don't have it now, but in scientific institutions took part in that, electrotechnical faculty in Belgrade, Zagreb, and other places, academies of science. On the one hand, it was very good and was positive, and it profiled the serious character of the museum. But on the other hand, this group of scientists in charge of promoting the idea of Tesla as electrical engineer had that kind of perception that limited the presentation of him as a universal person, a thinker who not only thought about science, but other scientific fields. And what I find interesting, he researched the influence of the technology on contemporary science. He had some studies on sustainable development, and it's very interesting to notice from today's position. After Tito's death, the period of transition of the museum started, and what was a milestone event is the internet, and it encouraged interest in the audiences through letters and emails, and in the recent years before the COVID situation, through direct visits, and it made the Nikola Tesla Museum one of the most visited institutions. I'd also add something about the functions of the museum and how it was operating and what lessons we can learn from that in order to create a good future concept. The memorial aspect of the museum is probably the most delicate aspect that people will face in the future, and I think that it should be sold very carefully. When the museum was made in 1952, there was no discussion. Somebody created a political concept, politicians supported it, and that's how it was done. But we've seen that there were some authoritarian decisions to solve it in one way or the other that caused discussions on and polemics, what should be done with the memorial aspect of the museum, that is the remains of Nikola Tesla. Unfortunately, our legislation are not precise enough and cannot regulate precisely this field. But we have some international legislation, the codex of museum-sensitive material remains of historical figures, that some actions and steps are needed, and consult people who participate in it. It's a wide circle of people in Serbia who should be consulted and then make a decision, whatever it is, to leave the remains in the future museum, or they will be taken somewhere to make a mausoleum. The church had its own opinion. It's a very delicate topic that should be paid great attention separately. And before we discuss the main function of a museum, I would like to add that even we are talking about the museum of Nikola Tesla, the core of it is we are talking about 200,000 documents and hundreds of objects. We've digitalized most of it, but there are some that are not counted and not digitalized yet. yet. We will probably, we're talking about 200,000 documents, which is the body of material to create a museum of ideas of Nikola Tesla, because the entire story about, we can put analogically this content, and we will do that surely. We will give creative people to design how, but the kind of communication that the museum needs to establish with its audience is not only in Serbia but in the world. We are witnessing how much people in other countries, starting from the neighboring countries and further, to how Tesla is recognized in America and in Japan, for example. The communication power of this name and brand is huge, and it opens fantastic opportunities for the museum in the future, which should be pity not to use. For the archive of, we've done a lot in regard to the archives. I've had a chance to set up several archives, Albert Einstein's archive in Jerusalem, for example, and they thought that I would see a spaceship of an archive, but they still keep the documents in traditional way as we used to do 30 years ago. Our archive is a very, very representative place where it is digitalized, protected, and set in controlled environment in cooperation with the institutions and conservators, and expect the future museum that will have at its disposal a larger space to just continue this conservation efforts in the right way. On the other hand, there is a lack of space in regards to the cooperation with researchers, and that's something that will be possible to solve in the future museum, because we will have a larger space where people will be able to come, and more people from the museum side will be able to communicate with researchers in the world in order to satisfy these needs, because museum is doing a limited job there, because there were just few employees working on that, and the space was limited. And I would also say that there is a good future for the library, because we need to put his work into the context and to study the scientific fields at the present at this time, in order to see how original he was and how much he relied on the previous knowledge, and collecting all the modern knowledge that came after his death. I've done that kind of work when I was working on my PhD thesis, when I researched documents. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I was researching turbo engines. And I went through the archive and the library materials that we had in the museum, as well as I collected modern articles, master and PhD theses, especially in Arizona University. And it was very good to put Tesla's work in a wider context. I would say that there are topics that are very interesting. For example, we have these requests and applications to illuminate Tesla's work on wireless transmission. This is something not done yet, but it is a task for us in the future museum. Speaking of that, I can go to the scientific aspects of the museum. The museum, since its establishment, besides the educational and exhibition activities, had this slightly scientific aspect, in that sense that, as I said, that there was a group of professors and academics who were electrical engineers around the museum. There was potential, and there is a potential there in this age of communication. Telecommunication, we can get connected, the museum can get connected with scientists from various, all corners of the world, especially science historians, because I think this scientific field is something that we lack in Serbia, and scientific history is in its beginnings, and this problem should be solved in the future. There is an idea that the museum should be oriented as an institution, an idea that to strengthen the scientific aspect of museums activities, whether by establishing a scientific institute within the museum or in some other way, but it is very important for another phenomenon, and that's phenomenon of uncontrolled use of Tesla's ideas and Tesla's name in various speculative purposes. We have some problems that museum has almost given up dealing with. They lean to correct the mistakes that we find in newspapers, in the media. The questions come to us from abroad. We had a funny situation. Tesla is attributed with the quote. I didn't catch that one. There is a researcher from America who asked from us to verify the originality of this quote, and we said that not only we can't verify it, but we have doubts that it's authentic. And he said, I spent years creating visualization of this idea. Was it wasted time? Is it possible? And we said, unfortunately, yes. It is something that the museum needs to dedicate to demystify these various misinformation or disinformation. We had some situations that people who are scientists, they use wrong sources to promote ideas that are totally outside the spirit and ideas of Nikola Tesla. It's a problem that will have to be addressed in the future. And all of these aspects that I've mentioned deserves a discussion and experts consultations how to solve the problems. To conclude, I would say that maybe the greatest challenge in this procedure of creating the concept of the new museum will be to create terms of reference. I think that this is the foundation that we must discuss. I don't doubt that the building defines the situation in a way, but I suppose that good architectural solutions will be found because the architecture of the building as such is very inspiring, but the functioning of the museum is something that we need to address. What are the processes that should be promoted? What is that it should be put forward to the forefront? What not to forget? And the problem that the colleague mentioned at the beginning. This museum will cost a lot. We have a lot of cultural institutions that are not financed suitably in order to be sustainable. The museum will have to think about how to earn money by itself. The manager of the museum will have to be very good so that funds are raised not only through visits but through franchises like other big museums in the world are doing, and we are lacking funds. In regard to the question Ivana asked to say something about my experiences, I would say that during my long career I focused on two key areas. I saw that some of my colleagues, older professors, almost their lives dedicated to one topic, Tesla dealt with, and they couldn't get to the bottom of it. For example, Professor Maricic, transformers. Some colleagues in America looked into pumps and turbines of that Tesla. I was interested to find out what is that from Tesla's legacy, what is the heritage that Tesla left with us in the scope of ideas that could be useful for the future generations. First, I looked into the methodology of his work. It's an interesting field, and it opens a lot of opportunities to discuss it when we're talking about the problem of education in our country, not only in our country, but in the world. The experiences that Tesla had, and what kind of knowledge we need in order to create wholesome personalities, not only skills, but character and personality. And recently, in the last 20 years, I was interested in ideas of Tesla connected with the future. When I lectured or through the museum exhibitions, we inserted this topic within the classical presentation of Tesla as a researcher and scientist, machines, devices, and principles that he invented. That this topic in his early insights into sustainable development attracted attention, because Tesla foresaw the crisis that we are living today. As an example, to tell you, somewhere around 1920, he said that this civilization is going to face hardships because the focus of it is on the social improvement of material life. Neglecting moral and spiritual problems is a huge lack, and the sustainable society of the future will have to address this issue. To translate it into contemporary language, we know that the sustainable development that we are talking about, it has economic, social, and cultural dimensions. And I think that thinking about the future museum in Cortes, like if we are trying to solve it through these components, it will have a good future. I would sum up with this, and what remains is to talk about the details of the various aspects. Thank you very much for...
Thank you for replying in such a great detail to explain everything that the museum, the problems that museum has today, and also what could be potential problems for a greater museum in the future. Thank you for sharing your research with us, which is certainly something that should be included in the discussions and decisions about the future museum. I also think that nomenclature of the museum as the Museum of Science and Technology is adequate within the field of technology, and this is something that we have. You have presented an example of good practice that we can use in the future, but I wanted to ask one more thing. I think that it will be interesting for our listeners to hear, as you were the person who expanded on the trend of guest exhibitions abroad. This is also this may not be your doing entirely, but it certainly happened when you were a director of the museum, and you raised the importance of the museum not only in our country but also abroad. I wanted to ask about the foreigners who were interested in the museum, but can you please tell us about the detail of cooperation with other people? So are there people who exist who do not know about Tesla, who have discovered Tesla only because of your actions or promotions of the museum? Have you ever encountered anyone like that. And what would be the next in the presentation and promotion of Tesla's work? What would be the key group of visitors for the future for the exhibitions of Tesla? So what would be important for us to know concerning the exhibition activities of the new museum? So who should the museum be adapted, or at least who should the part of the museum at least be adapted to? Who was maybe lacking so far in the information about Tesla? It seems to me that my main experience regarding communication during the organization of these exhibitions is, of course, Tesla is a national hero here and a well-known personality. Internationally, people do not see Nikola Tesla. They do not know about him, for instance, in China. But the brand is also very well known abroad, mostly due to Elon Musk's company, Tesla. So basically, we were using the promotional wave of Musk's marketing. You can also say that he used the marketing of Nikola Tesla, but he used his name and created a company based on that. I was often asked whether we ever turned to Elon Musk. I said we never have, believing that we can communicate with him and contact him for the future of the museum, but we need to, if we are going to do that, we need to have a great idea, as we should not turn to a man such as this if we do not have a complete idea and a completely thorough project. Maybe we should contact him for the next steps of the museum, but what I wanted to say is that in the perspective, museum with good management will reach much bigger and better investments. What is the chief challenge is that what to do afterwards, after the exhibition. It happened to me often that I had presentations and lectures on various parts of the world which were very successful, informative, and good. Then they described Tesla's early life and work. And in the other phase, I was dealing with Tesla's philosophy, his considerations about the future and the civilization, his his system of values, his guiding principles, which come from our own cultural roots. So this was a moment to promote Serbian traditional culture and values. I encountered a lot of questions about how can we find out more? What should the next step be? So the conclusion is that there was an activity about communication lacking for these people, that we needed more lectures, more workshops, more projects concerning culture and science. And this is something that is very important and we should keep track of in the future. And it could be possible only if the museum forms a strong team with a strong desire with a core from Serbia, but which should include cooperants from abroad. Thank you once again for valuable insights. I hope that we will have another chance to discuss this in the future. Thank you once again, Mr. Jovanovic, and we have Nikola who has a question. He eagerly listened to everything you had to say. I'm fascinated, I have to say. I'm fascinated with what I found out about Nikola Tesla. I'm a complete layman for his technological achievements. I love the idea of history of science, Mr. Ivanovic, and I believe it's lacking in our system of knowledge. So that's why I have a question for everyone, not one question. I will ask a question now, and then we will leave a couple of minutes until the next session for discussion. Thinking about the physical space of the museum of Nikola Tesla, I wanted to know if should we consider the complete virtualization of the space, so making a virtual copy of that entire space, as Facebook and Meta virtual space sending messages about the future, so that we should transfer into virtual space. And this is basically an association for the future of the Tesla Museum. So to what extent should the future museum of Nikola Tesla, or the reconceived, reinvented museum of Nikola Tesla, should it operate in a space which will be the new real for us? But I also wanted to ask Rifat. It's obvious that we have plenty of experiences concerning tackling the problem of industrial heritage spaces and its transformation into the heritage corpus or use in the function of heritage. What would be your advice? Or have we learned anything from our mistakes? What were our mistakes and what can we learn from them and implement it for this particular example for the future? And a question for Sonia.
Sorry, ne, za meni je super srpsko.
It's fine. Serbian question for me is fine. I will try and answer it, but if I will try and combine Serbian and so my question would be for you would be architecture and the spirit of architecture in the location with certain value for the author is fascinating. I'm interested to know how much is architecture affecting the spirit of the experience of the place itself, design experience of internal areas. How can architecture transfer the feeling of the spirit and values? Thank you. Of so that was the question. Whoever wants to answer that can answer that question. Whichever of you wants to answer first can go. So these will be the questions that I have at this point. Let's try one by one. I will give a brief answer. I think that the aspect of complete virtualization of the museum should be considered through the aspect of dehumanization. We have a thought of a thinker who was popular long ago, who said that machine adjusts to the weaknesses of man to make a machine out of the weak man. So this refers to technology, and we have at work the destruction of human values, of an over influence of technology. So my answer would be to find a measure for something like that, which will be a true challenge. The measure and the balance between everything, between the educational, scientific, culturological, and commercial and communicational. So that balance will have to be achieved. If we find that right balance, I believe that the museum will be very popular and effective. Nikola, you asked a fantastic question, and I don't know how good of an answer can I give for such a question. Maybe we can give some bullet points and some. Vladimir answered and provided an answer concerning the balance and the measures for the future. And I think that balance is the most important and crucial for the future of the museum. Concerning the scientific and technical museums, our experience from the past 50 or more years can be viewed as, we can see the museums when they originated from huge industrial giants, and they were functioning and operating as company museums. Then they were functioning properly. Afterwards, all of these museums are important and recognized both in Europe and in their locales. Everything was fine until the point where the industry started degrading, and these museums also suffered the same fate of the great giants. So In the previous slide, previous presentation, I showed several examples, which I believe, and I think that I will have to mention Vladimir again. At this time, the management is the most important who will be managing this museum, not only if the museum does not achieve sustainability, but achieve a certain level of sustainability. So this is from one side. What is I'm glad concerning the Museum of Nikola Tesla is that the state supported the entire project. This is one thing. And the other thing is that the Museum of Nikola Tesla has a lot of visitors. So from these two pillars who will support the economic feasibility of the museum, we can have a basis for the establishment or relocation of the Museum of Nikola Tesla to keep it operational to the extent it is today. So I just want to give my experience. Whenever I went to the Museum of Nikola Tesla, I had the feeling of confined space. So if the space is the problem, then this solution might give us the answer to that. And I believe that the Museum of Nikola Tesla, I see it in the wider sense as a museum which would deal with history of science, and that's what it's supposed to do. The Museum of Science and Technology, where I worked before, was created as part of a project of the Academy of Sciences concerning the topic of history of science. So this is we are those who are dealing with the history of science. Everything changed. So by changing our status, we were transferred to protective and research mode. We did not forget the history of science as the guiding principle, and we can see it from the preparation of the part that we discussed just now, that from the new media for information, that we need to promote that part of history of science in the future museum that we have, and we will have more than adequate space for the exhibition and presentation of these materials. I'm not a researcher of Nikola Tesla, however, I have read about him, and what I liked about his quotes is that ideas are the real heritage that we have. I also want to add something else. Consensus was probably reached concerning that we should use good experiences. I just want to share one experience concerning the decoration of the space in the building itself. Our colleagues must have seen this and discussed that. So the way the Museum of Technical Sciences in Berlin, in the space of the former Museum of Railroad, I spent an entire day watching the presentations and exhibitions, but also trying to see and understand how the whole space was organized, that I was fascinated by it. This is, I give my support to the whole project. I believe that we will succeed this time to achieve what we need to. And I think that we need to study the way the process of the renovation of the Sremski Museum, how did that process pass? Thank you, Rifat. Sonia, you have the word. Sure, briefly, yes, architecture is
I will have to switch, sorry. Anyway, in that way, we are also preserving the material past. I think this power plant you are intend to to organize museum. It is a fantastic architecture. It is the best way to preserve industrial architecture. Actually, it is not mostly industrial buildings are not the projects which are the great artistic achievements, but they are showing this functional concept, the essence of the industrialization, to build something to be used for its purpose, and repurposing the buildings is something that they're showing another dimension actually of them, and these are the best ways to preserve industrial heritage. As you know, mostly they're always on the push of different developers and others who see mostly their places as the green fields where these abandoned and ugly buildings should be demolished and built new bright ones. But actually through that kind of project, I really think your idea is perfect. You are actually trying to preserve the existing this material frame of everything, which also is the product of Nikola Tesla's inventions. And regarding virtualization, I would have a comment. I think what Mr. Branimir said it's very important, and just for to support the scientific community, or the community of heritage scientists, your archive, I think it's of immense importance, and maybe to upgrade the whole story of the new museum with through the kind of info center or open source science source could be maybe interesting to show. But anyway, just to have virtual museums, this was something I think, of course, somehow fashionable, maybe even used in this pandemic times. But actually, I'm also working as a museum designer and architect on this field. I think it is kind of supplement, but not very important issue to show everything in virtual. I don't know, but it is the question that should be really considered systematically. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sonia, very much. You actually gave the comment to all of the questions.
Sorry.
Which is really good. Thank you. That's really nice. So we thank for the first panelists. And,
ja se izvinjavam se, jel mogu da dodam samo još nešto malo?
Naravno, mi se trudimo.
I apologize if I can just say something. We will try to keep this open as much as possible. You introduced the question of virtualization, which is a subtopic of. But when we started discussing it, I want to ask first. So my personal experience would say that I definitely agree with Branimir that we should find a balance, and virtualization is only an accompanying part of the content, not the major content. In our country, let's say, maybe due to the standard and
na takvoj smo poziciji negde
and the position the country is in, we are behind in certain technologies, especially information technologies, and they are the ones who fascinate us more today. And what we can see in the field concerning the West is that the saturation of I'm talking about museology and culture, visitor culture. We can see a saturation of information technologies, or the virtual aspects of presentation of museum heritage, where we see a moment that the audience in the West especially is hungry for the real things, so the real exhibitions and not virtual ones. In Serbia, this is a bit different. Technology is all technologies still make us feel happy, so we are thrilled by technology. So if you explore the visitor of the museum at the time, that visitor is fascinated by the technology and the presentation, and not the content, which is supposed to be the goal. So for museology, after a brief time, that technology is outdated, and the visitor is saturated. He feels that it's enough. And what I found in practice in Italy and in Spain and on is the thirst of the visitor for something real. And we have that option still. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir. We need to keep that balance of use of modern technologies, which is impossible sometimes.
Okay, it's a great pleasure to announce this now, because we got two guests from abroad, including Vladimir Pereich. And I'm really honored to present Natalia Zarzecka, director of Krakowicz. You will, everybody else except Natalia will find out why we invited her. Also, Vladimir Pereich as the second guest, and our great pleasure to say hi to Sandro De Bono from Malta. Sandro, how should I say, museum thinker or museologist or the advisor of the Maltese Ministry of Culture.
Yes. Well, good morning, first of all, to everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. You can just say Sandro. That is the simplest. But I usually describe myself as a museum thinker.
Thank you, Sandra. We are very glad that we got you now. Also, we are very glad to have Natalia. This was, in a way, my personal choice. And I thought that it's... Okay, I'll break it down to the very personal story. In 2017, I spent several months living in Krakow in Poland, and it was kind of a research of why Poland was so successful in the European award schemes in 2016. So they won everything they could on the European level. So the Museum of Polish Immigration, then Museum of Polish Jews in Warsaw, then Krakowicz from Krakow, etc., etc. So many museums were very, very visible on the European scene. But one attracted a lot of my attention because it is dedicated to Tadeusz Kantor, one very controversial person and not so researched as much as I know in the theater history. And the parallel between those two persons, misunderstood, sometimes and very often neglected in the history and sometimes glorified, was very associative to me why we invited Natalia to represent how the Museum of Tadeusz Kantor was transformed into something beautiful on the river. Which river, Natalia? Sorry, Wisla?
Vistula. Yes, Vistula.
Wisla, yeah. Sorry, I just forgot about that. And the space was transformed thanks to the architecture, also to the new architecture, but also thanks to the very thoughtful and very insightful exhibition about Tadeusz Kantor, transferring not just his image and person, but also all of the ideas that he put forward and the very progressive ideas that he put forward into the theater. So Natalia, very welcome to our small talks.
I'm very glad.
And we got a word to you.
Okay. So now I understand everything. I was supposing that probably someone of you was visiting us. I wasn't. I'm surprised. Yes, I'm very happy to know this now. Yes, it's you have actually said everything what I would like to explain during my talk today already. But it's really important to me to know that you've been here and you saw it. And when I saw the first picture of the building you're gonna work with, I was really wow, what a fantastic moment you are now. It is really hard work before. You are challenging now, but then I looked at the history of Museum of Tesla, which is really impressive already. So I just realized that we are a very, very small institution if we compare you and us. So this, I think we should underline at the beginning, that we are very, very small institution. And I saw it that probably the visitors you have in a year for us is 5 years. So just to have an idea of what we are talking about. But please, I will try to share my screen with my presentation. Then other participants can see this fantastic building. Just a moment. I will try to.
You can go down to share screen.
Yes, but first I have to open, I think, my presentation. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. But wait. We are here. Okay. Share screen. Okay. Sure. Lovely. You can see it now, or?
We can see it. Just press F5, so you can get a full screen now.
Do you have a full screen now?
No, you have to press F5.
It doesn't work. Wait, I will do it by.
It's visible like this. It's okay.
But I can try to. I'm sorry for that. It's always like this. VDoc.
Just take your time, please.
Yes, then we have, where is this? Przejście narzędzia główne. Okay, it should be now. Okay, it's full screen now?
No.
Okay. Sorry, so we're gonna narzędzia główne. Pokaz slajdów. Just a moment.
On the bottom red line, press icon next to the minus.
Next to the minus. Thank you very much. Is this working now?
The same.
I didn't understand.
Probably we have some. Okay, we can go like this if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay.
I have written my lecture because I wasn't sure what you would like to have and how much time we have. So I would, if it will be too long, or please tell me, okay? Give me a sign. Krikoteka, originally named the center of the Krikot 2 Theater, was founded by Tadeusz Kantor in 1980 with the objective of the protection and dissemination of his heritage. Above all, the part related with these theatrical works as a creator and a spiritus movens of Krikot 2 Theater. It was an avant-garde group that quickly received an international critical acclaim and recognition of the public all over the world. In the same time, remaining symbolically homeless, not having in its disposition a theater hall or nor space suitable for office, neither archive. For almost 10 years, the institution has been the cornerstone of, I'm sorry, of Canton's theater, as well as living archive of his theatrical creation. After his death in 1980, the institution changed its name to the Center for the Documentation of the Art of Tadeusz Kantor. Krikoteka was back then located in 3 different seats in Krakow. In 2014, the new seat was opened to the public, enabling the institution to receive and host large-scale culture events that up until then, Krikoteca was carrying out of number of others disappeared venues. I would like to show you now the picture which shows our power plant. Yes, because then you can have a more idea why I'm probably here also. It is a very small one, but yes. After the revitalization, it looks like this. You can see it. So going back to the Krikoteca history, since 1993, Krikoteca keeps being responsible for safeguarding other unique place in the heart of Old Town in Krakow, which is Tadeusz Cantor Studio. It was where Tadeusz Cantor created the last works of his life between 87 and 90. And on the permanent display in this studio where can be seen his original furnitures, as you can see on the pictures, letter, drawings, personal items, very personal items, travel souvenirs, and more. At the same time, the place hosts also temporary exhibitions in a small gallery. I don't know, Nikola, if you have visited the small gallery, but I hope yes. It's in the center. Yeah, I can see that you have been there. So since the moment of its foundation, Krikoteca was mainly focused on the theater, although it's also played as a significant role as an archive of Cantor's artistic activities, paintings and writings, theatrical texts and other manifestos, because Cantor wasn't really a multidisciplinary artist. In effect, within years, there was created a broad collection of more than 53,000 artifacts. It consists of reconstruction of the set, including complex structures being recognized as objects of a part per se, sculptures, stage props, costumes, and the choice of his most emblematic works. Another part of the institution essential to Krikoteca's identity is an archive that was run and systemized by Cantor himself in time span of 10 years until the artist's death. There can be found here original texts, manuscripts, and sketches together with the audiovisual materials documenting rehearsals and performances. Archive and library demonstrate fully the scope of Cantor artistic heritage by giving the access to bibliographies, archival materials, films, audio tapes, lots of other kind of material of documentation. The main idea of the institution until the erection of its new seat can be described as a presentation of the work of Tadeusz Cantor in its pure form. In 2012, it took place an important turn in the way of institutional thinking. Introduced under the name of Radical Languages project was a way of suggesting a proposing possible interpretation of Cantor's work between contemporary art discourse and of dealing with the artist's creative output in that context. The program of multidisciplinary and performative events included performative acts, theatrical performances, lectures, workshops, film projection, and installation. In 2014, Krikoteca manifested this new attempt, opening in the new building a permanent exhibition based on our collection, but designed giving priority to the educational purpose. That was providing a depth insight in Tadeusz Cantor life and work, both general public and to the professionals. We have two spaces. You've seen here the drawing of our building with the main function. I would just underline that our exhibition spaces are just here and here on the top level of the frame, as we call. So for 5 years, we've had the exhibition permanent exhibition in the right wing. And the other wing we were using for other kind of exhibitions. First of this exhibition on the second wing, where exhibition presenting selected aspect of Cantor's works, means we have exhibited the pictures and thematic exhibition dedicated to Cantor, which were designed not with our collection. Means we have the theatrical collection, so the drawings and other things we were like bringing from other museums, and they were like several exhibitions dedicated really to different topics of Cantor's work. We made also exhibition that continued themes related to the work of Tadeusz Cantor, developed by contemporary artists. And very special exhibition that played tribute to Tadeusz Cantor, like the exhibition of Christian Bultański, which was the Christian Bultański in the Blink of the Eye. It was a site-specific installation created specially for Krikoteka. We've presented also work of other artists like Sarkis, also as a tribute to Cantor. Here we have the installation site-specific of Sarkis. We got also just like exhibitions that juxtapose Cantor with the other contemporary artists, exploring the existing parallels with the history also. We've organized a fantastic exhibition, Schlemmer Cantor. Okay, so these are the exhibitions, but what we do also is a broad of performative program that marriages together with theater, dance, music, and we have different banners of projects like polyphonies, choreographic machines, or roller coaster, which is created in cooperation with the Krakow Dance Theater. And it shows the young generation of choreographers and other artists. We also work a lot with former actors of Tadeusz Cantor. We organize lots of workshops to the public, different public, to the young artists and adepts of theater, but also we present other kind of artists. We are also a publisher, of course. Our books can be grouped in three main sections. First and mostly exhibition catalogs, who aim is to document our shows. The other group will be the books that put together and analyze Cantor's work, written and spoken documents related with Cantor and his actors. And of course, we realized numerous recordings of Cantor's plays, means the archival materials of his performances and rehearsals. There are other two branches to complete the picture of our program, of course, education and accessibility, that remain interconnected to broad extent, both of which addressed for adults as well as the youngest audience, are based on the Krikoteka's collection and in the same time on the objective of active participation in multidisciplinary environment. Our educational offer is formed by different kinds of activities, such as classes for school, music, theater, and visual art workshops, performative works, or lectures. During the pandemic, we discovered, let's say, workshops to take away. When all the people were closed in the houses, we just created boxes with workshops to the families that everybody could take from our desktop and work in the house. Then we publish it if they share with us the pictures or films. So we documented this in a booklet. So this is like talking about the new levels of institutional problems we have as a museums and in 21st century. This question of accessibility to the broad public, it's for us very important. In the same time, we put a constant effort on making our cultural offer accessible to broadest public possible, including the social groups with special needs, blind, deaf, physical and mentally disabled persons. Now, after years of our institution is truly proud of being acclaimed one of the Polish leaders in this field. It is really interesting how we as a specialist of Cantor could discover in the other level how this heritage could be seen or should be seen if we think of accessibility. This is really one of the things we did last 4 years, and we're really, really proud. And I would admit that is one of our really great success, and it gives us also another level of thinking of our collection, of redefining what we have to do as an institution. Okay, the 2020 marks another important turn in the institutional policy. That year, we have opened a new permanent exhibition. The new curatorial concept was substituting former educative attempt with the new one, which is determined by the topic of thematic narration. Tadeusz Kantor Spectres show is centered around the main theme, difficult pasts. That refers both to the complex biography of our patron and to Polish 20th century history marked by 2 world wars. So Nikola, is time to you to come to see our new permanent exhibition. It's totally different, and we changed also the wing when we are showing this.
Gladly.
Of course, I invite you all to Krakow. So we also decided to opt for more daring, in other words, less obvious dialogues of contemporary artists with Cantor's work and heritage between temporary exhibitions. This tendency was started by the opening of a show of Marek Landa and is being continued by a presentation by other artists, both Polish artists, Robert Kuśmirowski, that is dialoguing not only with Cantor's ideas, but also with the other artist Landa. In the same time, we are experimenting with remodeling our own way of thinking about exhibitions design. Enough to say that the word that described most accurately our last 2 presentations is a process. We renounced the former idea of creating fixed structures and decided to replace them with the polymorphic substances that is changing in time in relation to its environment, artistic discussions, and interaction with visitors. So it's really something really new. We have also started a new curatorial program, the Clorac Room, turning a former Clorac Room into a micro gallery, with the aim of working with the youngest emerging generation of the artists. For the next year, we plan to center again on work with our institutional resources, planning an extensive exhibition of costumes from Cantor's plays. There are more than 200 costumes never shown together, which we are planning to show next year. In spite of that of our patron 30 years ago, one of the most interesting challenges Krikoteca has to deal with is managing his heritage understood as a vivid, changing tissue. On one hand, it's being impeded by its specific, in big part, intangible. On the other hand, we are aware of subtle transformation that Cantor's legacy is living on different levels. Right now, we are working on the new modes of presentation of the content originally classified as an archive that cover a span of years evolved into artifacts. This observation triggered our decision to create within Krikoteca a separate unit Tadeusz Kantor Museum in 2018 had it still in stage of formation. So it was a year after your visit or your stay in Krakow.
Yeah.
This I will, another issue that we have to deal with is the disparation of Tadeusz Kantor's heritage. Apart from already mentioned at Krikoteka and the Gallery Studio, an institution of Małopolskie Voivodeship, exists independently a local museum in a small town, Wielopolskie, where Tadeusz Kantor was born, while the house in Hucisko, close to Krakow, is being led by Tadeusz Kantor Foundation that also owns majority of Kantor's paintings. This specific result is necessity of maintaining a constant dialogue between multiple social actors with aim of improving cooperation and making new collaborations possible. Okay, to conclude, I would like to emphasize that Krikoteka, as an effect of its history and other circus movements, I'm sorry, I hate this word, briefly explained it before, has never been a biographic museum, which is really important, I think. At the same time, a powerful link between the institution and Tadeusz Kantor is unquestionable. We interpret this specific as a heritage itself, constantly working with it, searching for new, effective languages, redefining, experimenting with these difficult but inspiring substances. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. I just want to say a word. I hope now it's more clear why I chosen Krikoteka to be the complementary example of why we talk about new spaces and new thinking of the personal heritage, which means much more to the collective, to any kind of collective mind. So in that way, thank you very much, but we'll come back to you in the questions. You will see Krikoteka.
I hope I will see it someday. So thank you for sharing all the insights with us, and I certainly hope so that we will have a way
Pričite mikrofonu slabo, vas čujemo.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we hope that we will have some opportunity to use some of your insights to shape our new museum ideas. So thank you once again.
Our next speaker is my colleague, Vladimir Pereich, curator of the Museum of Nikola Tesla. For years we've been working together, and his vast experience with exhibition activities can in some way help us to see the perception of the audience abroad about the life and work of Nikola Tesla. But I would also like him to talk about the way a curator chooses their materials, and how does he show and present Tesla with preservation of the identity of Tesla, the identity which we chose to show, but at the same time to show Tesla as a historic personality. And so what is the value of Nikola Tesla, which we recognize or which we sell, let's say it like that, and where can this value be recognized? Is only in the exhibitions which are attractive and interesting for all audiences, or does it concern more about some interaction and narrative about the perfect environment for that? I'll give the word to my colleague. Maybe he has his own presentation, which he will. Thank you, and good day to everyone once again. Basically, this is an important question because it concerns a personality which is characteristic and great. On one side, we can return to the other participants. On one side, we have the history of science or the representation of certain technological and Tesla's inventions. And on the other hand, we have the fact is about it's about the personality or the historical identity of a person, his origins, his life, his history. Now, what I believe is important and more easier to review is that such a grand life and heritage should be defined in several areas. On one hand, we have interlapping areas, as his life and work is such. When we're talking about with the museology, it's complex to use a chronological order of his life and research, precisely because he operated in several fronts which overlap. So we have a division into the past and future when we review his heritage. These divisions will attempt to reply to the question, what is the heritage of Nikola Tesla? In the Nikola Tesla did create certain inventions which were used to change the world, and this happened during his life, and he got his nickname, the man who invented the 20th century, which is now behind us. Which is a past from our perspective. The life that we live today, which was created based on his inventions and ideas. So the inventions which base themselves or upgrade themselves on his patents and inventions, while the future is something that will happen in the future. For at least partly, his ideas will only have their functionality in the future, so we will only use them in the future still. Nikola mentioned in the beginning somewhere that Vladimir also added to this. He also contributed the story about the museum now, which is the story about ecological problems or the sustainability issues, which Tesla already concluded 120 years ago or more, in the time where no one was paying attention to anything like this, as we have been considering these topics as of recently. So his heritage in these segments, on one hand, and in the museological presentation of his work, we have the manner of division into technology or technological work, his inventions that he gave to the world, and on the other hand, we have his social impact or his social life. As I mentioned before, we are discussing a personality after all. So when we're organizing any kind of exhibition or presentation, especially for the future museum, we have to consider that it's a museum of one person, meaning that all of these segments need to dictate his entire storyline and narrative. While we're organizing guest exhibitions around the world, this is exactly something that we are trying to include and encompass. So all of the segments of his life, depending on the possibilities of space and other factors that affect the exhibitions in general. So we try to combine an interesting work model which presents Tesla's greatest achievements and innovations, and on the other hand, they represent the narrative which will try to to tell the story of his interesting life. When we take into account, when we take all of that into account, I would like to go back to the question that Ivana posed. So, can we understand Tesla without long and laborsome research? His life is so complex that such a research would be extensive to understand any of his ideas or part of his life, or even the things that he attempted to do. So the more we research, the more we learn about him, the pool of knowledge about him increases. At least it seems it's like that to me. But both knowledge and wrong knowledge or ignorance. Everybody realizes what they don't know when they start researching. So we also have one situation where we have the opportunity to understand Tesla in some respect, and I believe that this is happening on a global level right now. To feel his character. What is important for me in the whole story about Tesla, about his work in life, is all of the segments of the heritage that we see. So the ideas that he left for us, and while the crucial segment of his legacy, as Mr. Ivanovic mentioned, he spent a lot of time dealing with this, and that is the message that Tesla left for the world. That is of crucial importance for any narrative about Tesla. When we are attempting to present him in any way, and that would be crucial for the new museum especially. This heritage is based on all of his ideas, primarily in the way he worked, the way he lived, the way he used the gift of knowledge that he had. In this context, I often want to use the quote of a song of a well-known pop rock band, Parni Valjak. The quote says that the intention is what makes difference from man to man, from person to person. So his intention, that was the driving force for all of his research and work, is something that makes all of the difference between Tesla and other great scientists and minds. His complete determination to give all of his knowledge and experience to the world is what really defines his character. So we circle back to Ivana's question, which seems to me that there are many reasons, of course, why Tesla in the past 10 years has expanded. So his popularity has expanded. So a lot of people know his character right now. They know about his inventions and ideas. Even though they know nothing about his life, or they have some small details or some parts of available in popular culture or in media, we have this moment when people feel his character, people understand why he's a hero of history. So we could enter or elaborate on the narrative of the presentation. So we would to transfer his character, and I believe it is the strategy for that is quite simple, and that is to review it based on these experiences as Ivana mentioned, to take the steps we considered. Of course, we are nowhere near Nikola Tesla and his life and work, but still we need to adjust our work to his ideals. Another thing that we mentioned is concerning the practical museological exhibitions. In this case, museum as such has to answer or reply to several missions or tasks, roles of the presentations and exhibitions. We already mentioned the distinction between the real and the virtual. I would also like to mention a good example that I have, and as I believe it's a good thing to use examples and analogies in telling stories and giving presentations. The example is the Tesla's transformer located in the current museum. It's the most popular invention, and it causes the greatest attention. This piece of exhibition is 7 years old. It's one of the oldest. It's a vital elderly person. In the past few years, it's been working more than before, and it causes the greatest attention. So it obviously was conceived well in the past because it is still used and everybody is still interested in it. So when compared to other forms of presentation, it is my belief that exactly here we can see the key of the museological presentation, meaning the interdisciplinary approach that we have from the very beginning. As Mr. Ivanovic said and mentioned, it existed in different forms before, but now we have an opportunity for the new museum, which will request the interdisciplinary approach, which we can see from other examples, from the best practices abroad. Recently, we have opened a great exhibition in Barcelona, in Cosmo Museum. So it's a museum of technology in Barcelona. It is a museum organized by the foundation of the Caixa Bank. We do not need to discuss their funds. They have good backing for something like that. It's very interesting to see how professional they organize the exhibitions there. They have countless associates who are engaged by the museum, and they have a pool of high quality team, starting from repairmen to artists and so on. And these are examples of good practice which we can help us in the future. I hope in the recent future especially. Another notion of review and answering the question on how to present any one personality in a museum exhibition, we reach a question of telling a story. One life is one story, and of course one life is a long story. We always have to keep in mind that people can't listen to long stories anymore today. So we come to the moment of what to do or what strategy to use. While you're mentioning long stories, Yeah, you should make yours a bit shorter, please. Okay, I'll do it in just a second. So we reached the state that, or the difference between Twitter and the book. The popularity of Twitter is that each tweet contains 150 characters, because people don't want to read more in today's world. So now we reach the decision: should we rely on Twitter or the book? My opinion is that we should not turn to rely on Twitter-like posts and forums, but to give the visitor a chance to love the book, meaning that it's our problem on how to implement that strategy.
Jedna slika, 1000 reči.
Tako je.
Znači i nad Twitterom, ima bolje od Twittera.
Even there's better things than Twitter.
Ja lično mislim,
It is my personal opinion, from my museological experience, I personally believe that with this situation and the conditions that we have, the current exhibition of the Museum of Nikola Tesla can be better, but it is, I can say, almost in a strategic sense, almost perfect to tell the story of his life and work. Only one thing,
posjetioci sami rezultat.
As far as the feedback is concerned of that was not us. It's kolega Alba. It was me, I apologize.
Izvolite. Dobro.
Vladimire, završna reč.
Can you give your final word, please, Vladimir? You need to switch on your mic. Yes. So the visitor number is what shows us a certain value. However, it is not the only thing. The feedback that we have, so we want to find out that that number of visitors was happy with their visit. They were satisfied, and this is the key feedback information that tells us if we did our job right. A funny story for the end. So this is the last thing I will say. Several years ago, it was 2 p.m. in a summer days in the standing exhibition of the museum, and at one point a kind of lost British tourist entered in summer clothes and asked, "What is this?" And I replied, "This is the Museum of Nikola Tesla." And who is that? And I tried to explain in several sentences. Okay, I don't know about him. I know only that I have to. My friends told me that when I come to Belgrade, I have to visit this place. If I overdid it, thank you, and I apologize. That's it for me now. Thank you very much.
Na malom kašnjenju, evo dajem reč profesoru.
Okay, I'll switch now to English, so for our translator to be familiar with the switch. Okay, thank you, Vladimir. This was really something to think about. And you mentioned several times the word strategic and strategy, etc., which is really good intro for Sandro to tell us how to think about putting the folders of one institution into the great character. Should we transform the narrative about the person, or should we transform the institution to talk about the person? Sorry, Sandro.
It's okay. Once again, a great pleasure to be with you. Perhaps if it wasn't for Tesla, this conversation would not be happening, because I'm in Malta, you're in Belgrade, and we're having some very interesting conversations. So I just know about Zoom. I know about the electrical plug, but perhaps many people don't know that the mind behind all this, or one of the big minds behind all this, is also Tesla. I'll be sharing my screen. I'll be telling stories as well, but I promise to be short because I've only chosen 5 stories, and each story comes with a visual. So it's 5 visuals, 5 ideas, and I'll be focusing much more on relevance. How can we make such an important, such an amazing, beautiful mind relevant to the world? Not just to the Balkans, not just to Serbia or Belgrade, but to the world. He's known, his name is known, but perhaps connected to other things rather than the essence of what Nikola Tesla stands for. I'll be connecting to what Vladimir has been sharing. In fact, we don't know each other, but there are some interesting connections that you will discover as I'll be going over my presentation. So my first visual is a box. We have come to understand the museum as a boxed experience, being a container with contents. And this is something that the COVID-19 pandemic has made us understand even more clear. Because what happened, what many museums all over the world, most museums all over the world tried to do is to cut out holes in this box and try to get people to look inside from the comfort of their zone. Now, this makes us think about what a new museum, and I'm very happy for you, this is an exciting time for you, what a new museum can be about. Should it be about a box space? Should it be about a box experience, or much more? I think museums need to acknowledge that we're at a crossroads with regards to our understanding of time and space. And COVID has made us understand that more clear. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we could access the contents of a museum. I'm not going into quality because there was quite an uneven situation. People were reacting to circumstances, institutions were reacting to circumstances. So it's the action, it's the act of access that I'm talking about. People were accessing museums from all over the world at 2 in the morning, at 5 in the morning, trying to understand what this content is. So space suddenly is not anymore boxed, but it could be accessed across a multi-platform experience. It's not just the time, but even the way we have come to understand space. So what does this leave us with? Some questions. Can I, Sandro, living in Malta, access the Tesla Museum at 2 in the morning and get a meaningful experience and understand who Tesla is? Can I understand who Tesla is by going for an online experience? Can I understand who he is by going for a game experience? These are the questions I believe that might be pertinent to ask. So that's my first visual. My second visual is this funny character here. You probably know him. He's Harry Potter. And I've chosen this visual of Harry Potter to explain what transmedia thinking is all about. Because I believe that there's a lot to learn for museums when we talk of transmedia thinking. The author is Henry Jenkins. The ideas are still coming together, but there's a lot of literature about this. Essentially, Harry Potter starts off as a book, 7 books, then it becomes a film, 8 films, then suddenly there's also Pottermore, there's also action figures, and Lego sets, and there's Wizard World. An experience that starts off as a book is translated, is transformed into a film. I could choose to experience the film, and I would have an idea, an approximate idea, a good idea of what Harry Potter is about. I could choose to experience Harry Potter by reading the book. I could do them both. If I go for both, I have a more holistic experience of who Harry Potter is. If I go for the whole gamut of experiences, being the products, the merchandise, Harry Potter world, etc., I would be experiencing the Harry Potter universe. And my question at this point in time, can we create the Tesla universe? Starting off with a linchpin space that is in Belgrade, a linchpin space that is the box experience, but which could be accessed from all over the world through a multi-platform approach. That's my second visual. My third visual is a shelf with books. We have come to understand museums as being a space to visit. And more often than not, I do it myself, when I go abroad, I tend to start off from hall 1 and go all around the building, looking at all the different paintings, artworks. I'm an art historian. I'm an art museum director, so my apologies if I refer to art and to the art museum as my reference point. What about thinking of the museum as a library? We don't go to the library to look at books. We go to the library to access books. We go to the library to read books, to purchase books, or to get them on loan. We look for information. We might need information that is in books, and we go to the library to access that information. Can we think of a museum as being a resource which is accessible 24 hours and which can be a resource for the academic, for the curious, but also for someone who just wants to understand how to wire a 3-pin plug? It's a resource, and the potential of that resource is far-reaching than the traditional museum experience that we have come to understand and how we have come to acknowledge that. My fourth visual is a comparison. It's the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo, and it's a Netflix logo. The ambition all over the world, and it's gaining ground, is to create human-centered museum experiences where man is the measure of all things. Now, when we talk of human-centered museum experiences, we need to understand what our society is in need of, what we need in our everyday life, how we choose to live each and every day, the ambitions, the expectations, and the requirements. And the analogy with Netflix, which I think is the big competitor for museums in the 21st century, stands very well. I can access Netflix whenever I want, during the time of the day that I would like to, look up content that I need or makes sense to me or that I wish to consult. Now, this experimentation is already happening within the museum ecosystem. I can mention the case of the Westerberg Museum in Bremen, who came up with a pay-per-use experience, meaning that very much in similar ways like you access a car park, you pay depending on how much time you spend at the museum. So if a fully fledged museum experience would roughly be 90 minutes, the museum actually offered packaged components where you could visit a museum for just 10 minutes and you pay just for that. That is an experience that is tailor-made for my specific needs and requirements. I might not have a full day to go to the museum, but I might just need to go to the museum to consult content because I want to be inspired. I might need to go to the museum just because I want to relax. I have some time on my hands, and in between errands, I'll just pop in and spend 10 minutes looking at amazing contents that the Tesla Museum, I'm sure, will be preparing. A custom-made, a tailor-made museum experience that can fit my own needs and requirements, also irrespective and beyond the place that I am. Obviously, the pay-per-use goes for the physical, but we could also think of a pay-per-use which could also be online. Now, this is a big debate as to whether we can monetize digital experiences. There's been some interesting experimentation in the UK, in the museum ecosystem of the United Kingdom. They have been experimenting, especially with lectures, paid lectures, and so on and so forth. The gamification world and the interface between museums and gamification is a potential sector that might lead to a monetized experience there. My final visual is a case study. This is a project that I did in Malta, one of the last projects that I did before I moved on back to academia. Now I'm a university professor lecturing in museum studies. This project is all about how people, how communities can acknowledge relevance in a collection. Essentially, 3 very simple steps. The first step was about inviting communities to visit an art museum. In this case, 95% had never been to the museum, and they were helped and empowered to choose something that is relevant. to them, that makes sense to them, that is of value to them, which could be inspired by memory, nostalgia, or any other value that they hold dear. Once they've chosen, they would be asked to present their choice to their friends and colleagues. So the process, which is all about helping them break the ice, would have led them to being completely oblivious to the fact that there's an art museum, to coming over, to helping them cross the threshold and come within the museum space, to choose something that is relevant to them, and then speak about it and share their choice with their friends. The third step at the end of this presentation would be asking them where they would like a visual of their choice to be featured in their community. And that's the visual. That's their text. That's what they think. That is what makes sense to them. And that is the reason why they chose this visual. This is not staged. It's something that a photographer just caught wind of as he was passing by. And suddenly a collection, suddenly stories, suddenly content that are within a box space, which could also be available online in a multi-platform experience, which can be accessed also for very many reasons, could become also the property and fully owned by the community. In the case of the Tesla Museum, it could be the international and global community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandro. It was very, very inspiring. That is really innovative, like a bespoke museum experience or personalized museum experience. And it is very, very important to understand that Tesla was also human and that we have to speak on our own levels. It's his own problem. Our problem is completely different. But anyway, there are some genius things. That's why the name Genian Museum of Genius, because we think that actually it has to be honest and very, very direct in talking to people and providing the people with their own choices, like Tesla actually had in mind, as much as I can figure out. That's something that Natalia said on the very beginning, actually, that completely Vitruvian man, Renaissance man like Cantor, Uomo Universale, tried to be transfigured into something small. Okay, it's a small institution, but very innovative in the sense of interdisciplinarity, different performing manifestations of that person and that brain. And that brain should be not divided, but widespread to as many people as we can. In that sense, seeing as a Netflix at the same time, it's quite challenging. Because I remember one museum director, he said, oh, our museum has to be open for academic and a fool at the same time. So it could be an idiot or a genius, which sometimes it's very close to each other. And you could talk to everybody. So that's exactly the point of Tesla. And widespread the borders, exactly what you said and what we mentioned in the first session, actually. It's not national, it's not any kind of borders that should be implemented, like your box on the very beginning. So it should be actually very open and innovative in that openness, it seems to me, on a very global level. So our state had to invest a lot of mind. Okay, the second session was really, I don't have any questions. So if you got any questions between yourself, or please, you can react to each other in the way you want. For me, personally, I'm very thankful that you offered to us because it's really valuable. Natalia, Sandra, Vladimir, thank you very much. It was really insightful and thoughtful. Maybe you got some questions, I don't know.
No, thank you.
Okay,
so I think
thanks.
We can give them maybe 5 minutes if you want to.
If somebody wants to break or something. I don't. I want to keep going on.
I would like to say one thing, that probably I will have to leave because I will be listening to you, but I will not be active. I'm sorry, because I have another things to do here. But what I really appreciate is that you think now and talk with different museums specialist, and I like Sandro says, it's really exciting time before you. And what Vladimir says, we have the same with Cantor. Of course, we know the difference, yes, but it's for us. It's really important that the public will come here. And it's not only the scientists, not only the admirers of Cantor and theater, also the people who works around us, yes, our neighbors, our community and everything. What else I would like to underline, because I didn't have an opportunity, it's the fact that our building is framed, and it's like the oldest power station in Krakow is framed with a new architecture. It's something to Sonia said before about the architecture and the thing how architecture can plan and be a member or also an actor in thinking of taking care of heritage. So if you look to our building, just to look at our building, which the oldest power station framed by a new architecture. So it's the same. We have the oldest heritage. Yeah, you have Tesla as a person, as a genius, but then you have to frame it with the visual, with the virtual and everything. And this is fantastic. And I really do hope to come to Belgrade again, because I was there 20 years ago and visit your museum. I'm sorry, Vladimir, I did not see it when I was there.
Natalia, you own to us. I have been to Krakow so many times. So you and Sandra was in Serbia as much as I remember. Am I right, Sandra?
Yes. I've been working very closely with your colleagues in Novi Sad, the amazing team working on the Capital of Culture 2022.
Sure, next year, yeah, on the very beginning of the next year.
Absolutely. They are doing amazing things, and I want to say hi from here. Can I add something to what Natalia has been saying? I fully agree with you. It is the Tesla Museum can be a space for everybody. Now, it's not that everybody will find everything in it, but at least if someone can find something within it, that is already a sign of relevance. I have a dream that the museum can actually inspire a new Tesla, a young Tesla, somewhere, anywhere around the world that could acknowledge your space as his inspiration.
Thank you, Sandra. Very insightful. So many stories. Sonia, I'm sorry. Sonia, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I have to leave. I'm very sorry, because it's really a nice discussion and good presentations. And I hope we'll be in touch. So good work to all of you. I don't just want to take your more time, but bye. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all got I think there is a chance to see it afterwards on the YouTube. It's going to be recorded as much as I remember, and it's going to be available on the online. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sonia, very much. Natalia, we are going to see you in Krakow and in Belgrade. Sandro in Malta and in Belgrade again. Vlado, you are here. It's much more to see each other again. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Third session now.
Vidim da su tu gospođa Ciri, Zorica I Maksimijan Alba.
I see Maksimijan Alba and Zorica here right now. Good day. Our last speaker for today will not join us. So the general director of Noesis. So we will be discussing with two of you only, with Maksimijan and Zorica. Firstly, I will introduce Miss Zoric. I've been following your work. Whenever I took out a piece of literature or any publication, I found you, whether as an editor or a contributor or an author. So you contributed vastly to us understanding Tesla's heritage and what is the exhibits located there in the museum. I have no idea if there was anyone whose contribution can be measured to yours in this respect. This is really, thank you so for everything you've done. Thank you for your kind words. You are welcome, and this is my opinion and what what is important for me now at this moment is that I ask you to tell me how you see the future museum, considering that you were working in the Museum of Nikola Tesla for a long time. Now you're working in the Museum of Science and Technology. So maybe you are in the ideal position to tell us if the transition to another space is feasible and what would be the basic conditions that we need to have, that we as experts need to fulfill, or the state as someone who delegates obligations and rights, and what is the way? Is there any suggestion that you have that you would like to give us from Tesla's legacy that must have been forgotten? We all talk about Tesla's coil, and we talk about the archives, but we mentioned articles, you probably read them. Is there anything else that you would like to point out that would be used to attract future visitors? And thank you. I want to say something that I tried to think about beforehand while I was trying to figure out what I'll be talking about today. We mentioned we will talk about the standing exhibition. I liked the institution and discussion that we had so far. Greetings to all participants. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to provide my assistance in this respect and share my experience and share the experiences of the Museum of Science and Technology. So each museum wishes to be an institution which you want to visit for the first time. That's not hard to achieve. What is hard to achieve is to make you come back again. That's what we actually want. So if somebody wants to return to your museum, it means that the museum is live and the museum is important in a certain society. What would be an alleviating circumstance for Tesla's museum is that it has the name of an extraordinary personality, and that Tesla's museum already exists in the map of Europe and the world. When the Museum of Science and Technology, it was built in 1989, but is located in the building, in this building since 2005. The path towards our audience was quite different. Than we had to start from all over again. So we had to. The problem of the museum, the challenges of the Museum of Nikola Tesla, the Tesla Museum does not face because it already exists. But there may be a great expectation we have from it, as each transition from one space to another provides us a chance for rebranding, for a new vision, for a new mission that we can define in this respect. We have enough manuals and for the planning of the museum layout, for the structure, for the planning steps that we need to take in the next part. The most important will be the content of the museum. So it is one thing that we have certain expectations. We also have to meet those expectations about Tesla. We know everybody knows about Tesla, but they do not know. They may not know a lot of things about him. This is something we need to pay attention on. The museum is a state institution. It means it's open for all. On the other hand, it's through rethinking and adjustment of programs, through the management of the level of technology used in the museum can be turned to several audiences or target groups. What I believe is valid for every museum is that the experiences that you gain during your visit and the experience do you have about the whole visit, is that the reason you come back to the museum, or is the experience Does the experience originate from the identity of the museum? What is important for Tesla's museum is that the institution should have their own identity and not stand behind the institution of the personality of about the personal. Of course, the personal is the inspiration. However, the identity is something. The identity should resonate with the audience, but it should not be. It should cater to the audiences. So we need to think about this, about about our new museum. So the identity, a general identity, is made up of the building, of the exhibition, and the contents available in the museum. If we talk about the exhibition, I believe that the exhibition is something of an amalgam between a strong personal story and the exhibition. And when we're discussing Tesla, the exhibitions are 3D objects. We also have the archives, so we have actual evidence. So on one hand we have the exhibits, and on the other hand we have the designing and conception, which should convey the story, and it should help convey the story by using space and by using visual design, as a clear, attractive form of presentation structure, and clearing simple language, both written and visual. What would be the guiding notion about our presentations and exhibitions is what we exhibit, where and how. I think that it should be simple and powerful. The notion should be intellectual and challenging. It should have high aesthetic value as well as nice shapes, and something which should reflect harmony, order, and harmony. This is all of these things are Tesla. What could be the danger? Yeah, it's nothing difficult, Zorica, right? Quite simple. Everything about Tesla seems simple. Whenever you read about him, everything is simple, but when you try to repeat what you said, you come to your problems. You face the problems. Soon I will show you several examples from different areas, but while we're considering the building itself, so far we talk about the thermal power plant, power and light. If there's ever a building existing right now that has an already delegated name, that would be light and power, I'm not sure that a power plant is the right place for Tesla. What was I thinking about? Thermal power plants and that technology is something, according to the paradigm existing today, is an outdated technology. Of course, the paradigms change. In 20 years, maybe thermal power plants will be something that is most needed, but at this time, this is not so. In the sense of branding and PR, but also defining the program of the museum. Tesla's name is connected to Niagara Falls, which does not mean that that's the only connection that we can make with hydropower plants. But considering the paradigm existing today concerning thermal power plants, it seems to me that this is also would be the reason for a the exhibition program that we have, but the nature of the building, we have the moral obligation that the building will be the house of the personality of Tesla, who always cared about the future of the world. The two power plants located in the vicinity, the power plant, are currently the biggest polluters of the environment in Serbia. So I think that it may present the perfect chance to locate the Tesla Museum in the Museum Power and Light. It would be a chance for the two existing power plants to solve their or resolve their pollution problems. So we should not definitely have we have two power plants with Tesla's name with a negative connotation as polluters, and we have the museum of Tesla in a power plant. This is something that we should care about, we should consider in general. And now, as soon as I find the button, I will open my presentation. One moment, please. It's in the bottom of the screen.
Just see. Can you see it? Yes, we can. It's good. For the beginning, I chose the museum that I'm currently in now, the Museum of Science and Technology. I chose some examples of museums that are located in thermoelectric plants. Our museum does not have that ethical obligation, of course, in the form of responsibility to the future, considering the nature of the building we are located in, but we have the programs that concern energy efficiency and sustainability as part of our everyday activities. The second museum I chose to show is an art museum located in the building of the famous architect. It uses the interior in a fantastic way for exhibitions, but I chose it because it doesn't have the obligation to refer to the nature of its building. The next museum is a very interesting museum located in Roma, and it is in the central Monte Martini, former thermoelectric plant. When you see it, the image, there are some similarities with your museum when observed from the Danube. It looks like this today, and what makes it interesting is the kind of materials exhibited in this museum. For temporary reasons, for some construction works in Roma, these machines were placed here, and the exhibits of this kind were placed there, and you can see this contrast to the importance of the exhibits, and sometimes you need not add anything because the exhibit speaks for itself. This is the kind of archaeology, and it led me to think about the history of science. When we say the history of science, sometimes people have some resistance towards it. Sometimes people think it is dedicated, intended for a very narrow group of people who are scientists. But I believe that Tesla's contribution cannot be understood fully if you don't show what was before him. And that's why I think about it as an archaeology of science, so that the history of science can be made more attractive. This is the generator, electric machine, exhibited in 1881 in World Expo in Paris. And who could have imagined that after a couple of years, a completely different machine would be developed. And for Tesla, about the history of science, was for Tesla, the history of science was more interesting than the stories from 1001 Night. How make people understand the 2 millennia needed to pass to give birth to a science that we use every day, and it took so long to have one invention. This is not something that should discourage us, but to show how how important this process was. And that's why the idea about archaeology was a good association for an approach to the history of science to make it less serious. In regards to identity, you know, K dot is Kafka. This museum inside, it is the interior, it is made in such a way, designed in such a way that it is suggestive of the confinement that Kafka felt in Prague and his heroes, his protagonists as well. There is a very nice part, but it is, I don't have a slide about it. I didn't want to take too much of your time, but they set brilliantly documentary materials that are set in drawers that you open, and this part of the exhibition is very nice and is useful to see what it looks like. And for the end, I chose another genius. When you see this museum, you immediately know that it is Dali. I chose it also not for the fact that he was a good painter, but he knew science of his time very well. And that's important for thinking of, when you think about the exterior identity, and this is the interior. The expressive means used should be those that are appropriate to the person, and Tesla is absolutely fantastic in the same way as Dali was. These were my thoughts, and if I can add anything in the discussion, I will be glad to. And I think that we followed up on each other quite nicely, even though we didn't prepare it was a continuous flow. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you. Great ideas. I can't hear you. Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you very much. You illustrated your thoughts and gave us ideas for future thinking of ours. Thank you. And it was my pleasure. Our last but not the least important participant, Maximilian Alba. He is the last only today, of course. He is my colleague. He works at the Nikola Tesla Museum as a graphic designer and curator. He made the graphic design for many of our exhibitions in our country and abroad, and he has a very recognizable style. I think that he perhaps prepared some of the materials that you can see, but what I would like him to share with us and discuss with us is the pure and clear visual language that illustrates the aesthetic value and narrative value of a material and how he chooses it, according to himself, the given past, the culture of the nation. Don't be so suggestive. Let him how actually you choose what design is the appropriate for each exhibition, and the colors, shapes, whatever can be interesting within this topic for us and our panelists. Thank you, Ivan and Nikola. Greetings for everyone, all the participants. Basically, what I do when I work on a project or exhibition, I focus on what the content is, what we want to communicate, and all the rest with decorative must serve this purpose of the content. Generally, in regard to visual identity, I like to say something about that in regard to new museum. Mr. Sivich mentioned that the new building is an opportunity for rebranding, the new beginning, a new visual language. And what is distinctive for this museum, it is standing on the crossroads between history and new technologies. It attracts young visitors and elderly visitors, and the visual identity should communicate with a wide audience, which means that it should be pleasant, clear, pure, to have colors that are warm, not too technical, and that should be reflected in the entire visual identity, photography, colors, and the execution as well. And what is important is that it communicates in a language that will present the future museum in its entire marketing. Not to have only when the man gets into the museum and to recognize this identity, but to make it recognizable on social networks and marketing and advertisements. What I would also mention is I would like to touch upon the topic of a museum as a point of gathering. It seems to me the situation is in Belgrade now and in Serbia. We have so many infrastructural projects, new complexes, residential and business complexes are being constructed, but the cultural space is lacking. I think that museums are those cultural institutions that can be a space for public can attract professionals equally and the wider public, and make it a place of gathering, of meeting, organized meeting, workshops, open use of library, relaxation. What we've been doing in the last year, ever since we learned that the museum will be moved to a new building, we started thinking about how this space would function, not only in the light of graphical design, but how to organize the space in regard to exhibitions, using the space in for other purposes. Thank you for mentioning that, because it's very, very interesting. I'm now opening the presentation. Here it is. Just a second. Can you see what I'm sharing? Yes. Good. For some reason, I don't have sound. We can hear you. Okay. We've seen the presentation for a second.
Ovo je bio recimo prvobitni.
This was the original. Sorry. I thought that we were muted. I said that it was a very good, that she used the word museographer. It is museographer. It's a word that we don't use very often. I can't hear Ivana, sorry. That's right. What we had an opportunity to perceive, the initial idea was to have the building of the Museum Nikola Tesla to be located in the former railway station, and that was our basis for designing. And we didn't know at the time that we will be moved to the thermoelectric plant. This is just a conceptual solution. What I would like to draw attention to is the interaction between the digital and physical, as Vladimir mentioned already. Considering the fact that Tesla's heritage is rich in, physically rich with his with everything that he's left, and I think it would be pity to make it digital, and the technology should be a follow-up on the content to make it complete, not to be a substitute. So I think that in using technology, we need to be careful not to use something for its own sake, to make everything very attractive and spectacular, but to have it, to make it integrated into the existing concepts. So the example would be the 3D mapping of the space, to illustrate his travels around the world, to use his huge photo archive and to use it to get the audience familiarized with the content, to take something that's locked in some boxes, to take it out so that people can have experience. Then interaction between his archive, and we can give the visitors the opportunity to open the drawers, to discover his patents, his correspondence. We can show his personal items, not maybe physically, but to have some augmented reality. For example, when you touch an item, you can get a wider context of how Tesla used these items and objects. In the museum, we have examples of virtual reality where we lead the visitors into his laboratories and invite them to take part in his research. It can be integrated in the projection hall, cinema hall. This is the coil to show wireless transmission in so many ways. We can also make augmented representation of current, electrical current, and magnetic waves. It can be made alive. Maybe the room within the Niagara Falls, where the visitors could come and feel as they're standing on the edge and looking at the electric plant, and to have a full experience. We should use his innovations, but modernize them and give them a new life. This is something that I wanted to share with you.
Quite nice, I have to say. Thank you. Zorica, thank you. I wanted to say just that. So not all of the things that that were shown, but also the things that we heard, and that is that Maximilian is a good speaker, knowledgeable museographer. That this is the first time I heard this story, this word for the first time. We understand that, and even though the design is fantastic, it does not have to dominate for itself, for its own purposes. It has to augment the content of the museum. So about the belongings and items of Tesla, but also what the museum institutionalized somewhat. This is what Mr. Ivanovic said, or tried to convey during his presentation. It's a great thing that people are redefining space in such a way, and their experiences of the museum. So these are the people who come to museums, or the visitors of the museum. They choose their own experience and the way they visit the museum, even though we know that today hybrid forms can exist with no problems, and that we can use them. Thank you for all of these solutions. It's quite rare that we have an opportunity to see that somebody actually reviewed and materialized their ideas about this topic, so that we can see them and feel them and discuss them, of course. This is quite useful for some of the future discussions that we will have. Ivana and myself are convinced that this should not remain only a pilot project, that these kinds of discussions should be held constantly until the moment the museum finally opens, until it's officially opened with a ceremony. So thank you. This is a personal note, so a personal thank you for the personal panel, for this final panel, and I hope that we had a chance to see the future.
Bliže mikrofonu, molim vas.
Online.
Is it online? I'm too quiet, probably. When this form of these focus groups with experts from various fields should be held as much as possible. I want to add that in some point this project that the colleague presented, it was elaborated until the greatest details. We have a library in the project, the layout of rooms, the archives, the offices, everything was conceived in an excellent way, in an incredible manner, which shows that it's not easy to make something like this, as a lot of problems were taken into account to make this space as functional as possible, and so that it would be designed for use by everyone. Thank you, Alba. Maybe next time we will see the entire layout of the rooms. I saw that Ms. Civrich was exhilarated with Niagara. I really believe that all of the solutions are excellent, and what is especially precious in the solution that you saw is that the application of all material application in the sense of exhibition and presentation is extraordinary. Most of the materials were exhibited, which has not happened so far. We will have more opportunity to show this the exhibition in the future. Thank you everyone once again for your participation, and thank you for all of the visitors and viewers. If anybody wants to add something.
Okay, then it left to me to say thanks in English, to relax a little bit our translators, to speak a little bit on Serbian for them, and I'll take the charge for English. It was really fruitful. As I said, this was only pilot. We invited people that we thought that could share the ideas between themselves and help each other. Ivana and her museum, on my side, professorship, I'll have a lot of things to speak to my students, and very useful insights how things could be developed. We thank you all for this very engaging, and very interesting and very provocative ways of thinking for us, especially to consider what should be done and how to pressure the Ministry of Culture to hold these kinds of talks every 3 months in order to get the best possible solutions, which was the case in case of one of the Serbian museums, and the result is amazing. Not to brand the museum now, not to talk about that. We talk about different museum now. But anyway, for the very end, thank you very much. It was very inspiring for me. I hope for you too. Hope that you got some benefits for yourself and for your work to continue with. And we can promise, at least from our side, to stay in touch, keep in touch, and to talk to you personally and in group every little bit of time. Thank you very much once again, and we wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourself, and hope to see you all very soon.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.